Yeah, that's it. And good evening. And hopefully we'll have numerous sessions. I'm hoping every 3 or 4 days, really, because we've got so many things to discuss and things are moving very quickly. Sometimes it might be just a small handful of people chatting on a specific subject. Sometimes a presentation like tonight that Andrew is doing. Other times we might do Q&As, and particularly I'll be keen that members come and talk about their own experiences about, for example, Rado's got to deal with a lot of tenants. We'd like to hear from him how his experience is with that, what the feedback is, and so on and so forth. So it's a slow start. We didn't expect too many people on the first night. No doubt more will join us during the course of the hour. Shane has just logged in, so that's great. Hi, Shane. Great to see you here. Then tonight, this is a public session, so non-Unity members can join in, and we will be mixing it up a little bit. You know, we'll be having some public sessions and some members-only sessions over the coming weeks and months. I know yesterday Mark Alexander and Mark Smith spoke to me and said that they're keen to do a presentation, so that's something to look forward to as well. I don't know a great deal about this program. It's new to me. Andrew's very familiar with it. But if you have a look around your screen, if you're on an iPad or a phone, you can just tap it and a little menu comes up. The things you can do is that you can raise your hand. That's not physically, but you can click a button to raise a hand, and that will show that you may have a question, and then we can unmute you and bring you in when Andrew is ready to ask a question. Alternatively, you can type your question in the chat box, and maybe somebody else who's watching at the time may be able to come in and suggest an answer. Let's see how we get on. So, Andrew, can we hear you?
I think I'm muted at the moment.
Yeah,
brilliant. Unmuted now. Can everybody hear that?
Yeah, well, they can't tell you because they're muted.
Fair enough. No problem. Well, if you can't hear me, please raise your hand so that Rupert can let me know. But I'm assuming Rupert can hear me, therefore everyone else can. First things first, I'd like to thank Rupert for this very generous invitation. And also, I'm sorry and sad that I wasn't able to meet you all in person yesterday at the Unity event because of restrictions on crowd gatherings. So I'm going to share with you my negotiation 101. So a little bit of background. I've never been on a course about any of this. Everything I'm going to share with you is from the School of Hard Knocks. I've run my own businesses. I've worked at a very senior level in some large multinationals, and I've been headhunted into other companies. And it's only when I retrospectively analyze things that I actually spot that I've been doing something that's been powerful and worth a share. So I'll get started with, if you've ever met somebody who's been on a course, you'll often see that the first thing they do is vomit all the jargon that they've just learned all over you. Now, during this presentation, I'm going to avoid talking jargon, because the approach I take is aim the conversation at a 12-year-old, because every 12-year-old can understand you, then every adult can. When negotiating with somebody or discussing something with somebody, the worst thing that you can ever have is when somebody's talking jargon or talking above you and you don't actually understand them. And it puts you in a position of feeling uncomfortable and embarrassed. So what I will do is try and avoid putting you in that uncomfortable or embarrassed position by straight talking, keeping free of jargon. So this has got to be one of my toughest gigs ever. I'm a chartered accountant. I do have a unique blend of skills when it comes to business and property, because I grew up on building sites from the age of 3. That was my father's trade, and I used to go out with him in his van before all the health and safety brigade got involved, and used to learn an apprentice with all of the different trades on sites. So I'm actually skilled enough to do most jobs on a site with my own hands, and therefore that puts me in a position to be able to control direct and also tell builders, etc., when they're trying to blow smoke up my behind. I'm a chartered accountant. I understand the numbers and the tax, which is important in any business, especially property. I held a senior position in a bank. I was responsible for mortgage, insurance, arrears and commercial divisions, reporting to 5 directors, the other director being the FD. I was headhunted from there to a top 20 law firm, where I founded the UK's largest conveyancing warehouse. Whilst there, I was instrumental in setting up online land reg. I was also instrumental in working with Aviva to put in place the title defect insurance policies. So I've done some pretty big stuff around property. And then I founded my own series of businesses 20 years ago, first one in the year 2000. Now, this is one of the reasons I was introduced to Rupert through a friend of mine, a mutual friend. And it was the fact that I bought a business for it was on the market for £5.6 million. And 18 months later, I bought it for £12,400. Now, the little story that goes behind that is the management team of that business bought it off the original founders for 5.6 million the day before Northern Rock went under. Therefore, timing was bad for them. 18 months later, I got a phone call from one of my suppliers, because this was a competitor to my business, who told me they'd gone into administration an hour earlier. I got on the phone to the administrator. By the afternoon, I was on site and I was agreeing with him how I could purchase this business. The negotiation started at £1 million. I started at £10,000 and we settled on 12,400. So I managed to move him from £1 million down to 12,400. That's a pretty damn good deal. And even this week, I am still making profit from that business that I bought in 2010. So I help investors structure and negotiate deals. I'm also a commercial property mentor and a deal implementer on commercial workshops. I'm, as you can probably tell, and Rupert, I hope you don't mind, the host of the Great Property Meet. And on screen, you'll see our charity Christmas party that we recently held. I got a bank to sponsor it. They sponsored all the Christmas hats. I also got the community together, and the great and the good of the community generously donated auction lots that we auctioned off. We raised enough money to help 65 rough sleepers, proper homeless people off the streets of Rugby and Leamington Spa. Those people we took off the streets for 28 days and nights, and we gave them food. And it was not me, that was the community which I host. I also have a little YouTube channel, and on here, Rupert has mentioned Mark Smith is going to come on and do a talk for yourselves. He did a talk for myself. He's pretty damn awesome. I also did a Q&A with him, and I've got lots of quirky videos which share a lot of knowledge from experts that you can join into. So let's get down to business. Negotiation 101. What do I hope to share with you this evening? I want to share with you about people and language, about identifying boundaries, people's needs versus wants, how to pace a negotiation, staying on the same page as the person you're negotiating with, managing those emotions. And I promised Rupert I'd give him a bonus. So I said I'd share how I submit blind tenders and win. And I thought, just because I can, because I like the fact that I used to work for a bank and I liked the bank that much, I went and bought the bank. So I'm going to share that with you tonight as well, and how I got there. So I mentioned at the start, avoid talking jargon at all costs. Aim your language at a 12-year-old. People get embarrassed trying to say, well, I'm not quite sure, I don't understand. People are very comfortable saying, I understand that. Can we take the conversation up a level? They're happy to drag you up, but they're reluctant to drag you down. Frame questions that you ask to fish out their concerns and their needs. In my experience, I find sellers have got common concerns. It's either the price or the transaction falling over. What are your concerns? Get them to tell you what their pain is, and then you can solve that pain with the solution that you offer. It helps to tie up deals much more quickly. Now I'm going to demonstrate how I've done this with case studies of transactions from over the last year. We also need to move the seller from a logical state to an emotional state sometimes, or from an emotional state into a logical state. That's a very powerful thing to do when negotiating with an audience, with a vendor or somebody that you're dealing with. The reason being, if they're in an emotional state and you need to talk about facts, they're not going to be engaging with you. So you've got to move them to the right part of the negotiation stage. Now, this gentleman here is a gentleman called Andrew Bott. Without being rude, he spent over £100,000 on courses and mentorships, and he could not get a transaction over the line. He's a really great chap, very bright, but I helped him get his first deal. And the first deal he got was actually that whole series of buildings for £2 million. The young ladies sitting in the hot tub are actually his management team that run that facility. And it's a very large serviced accommodation block that he's going to also add in a wedding venue in the stables that are underutilised. Now, Andrew came to me in January last year, and I offered to sit down with him and give him some help identifying why he was not getting deals over the line. And he brought me this transaction, and I got him to try and negotiate that transaction with me. And I identified the key thing he got wrong was language. He came at it from his perspective, not from the vendor's perspective. He was also using jargon he'd learned on courses about lease options. And the problem was the vendor did not understand a word he was saying. It was like talking Chinese. And that was why all his deals were falling over. So I took him back and I gave him step-by-step instructions as to what to say, what the answer would be, because as human beings, we have certain questions. How are you? And you normally respond, I'm okay. It's a scripted answer. You don't want to give too much away to a stranger. And in a negotiation, you're a stranger to the other side. And when you understand scripted answers that people are going to come back with, you can then have secondary and tertiary questions to go in with. So I helped Andrew to actually frame a series of questions to lead the vendor to a position where they could actually have disclosure and an open discussion. That transaction was agreed. The photograph of him presenting on stage there was at the Baker Street property meet in front of 300 people on his success. So that is how I've helped other people to get transactions over the line. So my killer tactic here is this business is not about property at all. It's not about strategy. It's all about people. And you need to focus on people and the language you use. I prefer to use the term seller opposed to vendor. I prefer to use the term customer opposed to tenant. For a lot of people, that's strange jargon. But for the average person on the street, that is how they perceive themselves. So when talking about people, not property, we need to build trust with them, build tactical empathy by mirroring their body language, by mirroring how they are talking. We need to put them at ease. Now, a very clever thing that you can do is repeat their words. And this demonstrates that you're listening to them. A lot of people do it without realizing they're doing it. And I suggest picking no more than 3 words from the last sentence or paragraph that they have spoken to you, and repeating just those 3 words. What that does is, just by repeating 3 words, is allows them to continue to say more about that. And remember, we have 2 of these, 2 of these, and 1 of these. So use that 20% of the time, and the others 80% of the time. Therefore, they believe more about what you say to them. And the less you say, the more they actually begin to like you and trust you, believe it or not. Because you're sitting here and you're probably running through your head with a little radar on your head going, liar, liar, pants on fire, don't believe you. Whereas if you were saying it, you would believe 100% of what comes out of your own mouth. And that is the art of negotiating using tactical empathy and mirroring. And the mirroring part is to take their words and repeat just 3 words, 1 to 3 words back to them from the last part of the negotiation. I always like to say to people, what would you like to see happen in this situation? If they throw something at me, I throw it back to them. Well, what would you like to see happen? And by getting them to describe what they would like to see happen, you can either say, if I could do that, how would that make you feel? Or if I do that, do you think we could agree a transaction? And it opens people up. Now, something which I do, which is a little bit controversial in one way, is I stalk people online. If I'm going to negotiate with somebody, I watch anything that they've got in video format. I read their Facebook posts. I look at anything that I can find on that person. Now, the reason I do that is people use specific language. And if they're using the word honest opposed to genuine, then I will put honest in my sentences to them. It helps you to again mirror and match them with the language side of things. So it's a bit weird, but if you're going to a vendor's house, a seller's house, and you've picked it up off your marketing leaflet, and you're looking at something along the lines of a distress sale, if you thump their details or their property into social media, you'll generally find that you can find them on Facebook. And if you find that they're posting in divorce forums, you know before you walk in the types of questions that you need to be framing in order to get this transaction moving forward swiftly and positively in your direction. So you can frame your language and use the buyer or the seller's language to actually achieve your objective and shortcut that know, like, and trust circuit. I always like to probe their pain, their fear, or their greed, because when you're probing their pain, fear, or greed, that is the thing that is going to make them make their decision to do a transaction with you. Now, you must not abuse it. You must use it as a tool to be able to present your solution. And I'll use an example of that when I show how I bought the bank later. And the key thing that I rarely do is I will rarely agree or propose a solution in the very first meeting when I'm negotiating with someone. The reason I don't do that is I will generally defer, saying, that's a great big problem you've got. I need to go away and have a word with some friends, some colleagues, some professionals, and try and work out a solution for that. I might know it right here in my head, but if it comes too easy, they don't believe it and they put up resistance. So my killer tactic here is mirror the person's language pattern. You will see people say, I see what you say, I hear what you say, or I feel what you say. And if you mirror that language, that helps you get onto their wavelengths so much quicker. And you need to take control of your inner voice. We all have a little good devil and a bad devil sitting on our shoulder saying, you can do it. No, you're not going to be able to do this. You need to take control of that inner voice. That's important because the tone that you speak with conveys your inner voice. If I'm fearful today, then I'll sound nervous. My voice will go up. I'll speak faster. If I'm feeling quite relaxed, then my voice can be calm and speak slower. Now, when negotiating, a really good tactic, listen to some late night radio. Late night radio DJs have a really slow but deep voice. It's quite calming and quite relaxing, and it puts people at ease. Do not come over as assertive. Assertive makes you go, whoa, hang on a minute, I'm not sure I'm going to resonate with this person. You'll notice, and Rupert's known me a while, I'm always smiling, I'm always laughing. A smiling, playful voice people relate to and people engage with, and it again brings down and breaks down barriers. There's another tone that you can use, which is the analyst's voice. It's quite factual, it's quite specific, there is no warmth in it, it's quite slow, it's quite downward deflecting in the tone. And when you take on an analyst's voice, you use it very rarely when negotiating, because what you're doing is you're bringing it back and you're saying, look, these are the facts, and you use your tone to actually drive that. So I use all of these tools when negotiating to help define the statements that I'm putting out there with the party that I'm negotiating with. So let me give you some property and relate it to a transaction. Now, this is a property, Brendan Way in Nuneaton. The vendor had had 3 sales fall over and was getting to the end of his tether. And I secured this on a rent to buy scheme. Basically, the problem he had, which unfortunately you can't see, is on the roof of his house up there, he had solar panels, but he hadn't bought them. What he'd done is had one of these companies out of the newspaper come and fit solar panels and lease his roof. Now, every buyer that was coming into this vendor's property was sitting there loving it because it was a nice house, very eco, etc. But the problem was their mortgage lenders did not love the fact that they'd leased the roof. So what needed to happen was a paperwork issue to solve that lease issue, which I knew it was relatively easy to do. So we agreed we would purchase this off him in installments, paying him on a monthly basis. We took away his pain of that number of failed sales. To assist the process using language, I kept referring with my colleague to the fact that this house is a problem house. I bet you're sick of this house. He'd actually bought another house in Scarborough and he wanted to get to his dream home. So we kept moving him to his dream home using the subliminal language of house and home, moving him out of one and into the other. We agreed that transaction over the course of 5 days and tied up a rent to buy. It's got a retail price of 125, but we're paying him in installments. So we've paid no stamp duty, we've paid nothing other than £400 a month for the last 2 years on that transaction. That's a good transaction to me. I haven't had to go and stump up a 25% deposit. Very quick, very easy to do. Now, the one thing in life, you've probably heard it many times before, when you're preparing for a negotiation, research, research, research. You cannot do enough research on a situation, a property, an area, a vendor. That all helps you prepare. What I then do in my office, because I'm a team of staff here, I run through the various scenarios that we could go down and we role play what is likely to happen when we meet that person. Therefore, we can encounter and dress rehearse any of the problems that we're going to have. I consider the structure of the transaction because lots of people just see it as, I'm going to buy a building, I'm going to get some finance, and then I'm going to add some value. You've got to consider the structure of that. Now, Mark Smith's going to talk about structure. He's also going to link that into tax. As an accountant, I can consider all of that in-house. You might need support. I also consider the location where we are going to hold the meeting. And I rarely meet on the other party's territory. The reason for that being, if you went to the Olympics, the home nation always gets the best medal haul that they've ever had because they're on home territory. We only won the World Cup once, and it was when it was back here in England in 1966. The home nation always has home advantage. So when I negotiate, I always meet people out on what they perceive to be neutral territory. My neutral territory just happens to be the hotel where I hold my property meet. I'm in there probably 3 times a week. So it's pretty much my home nation location. But from a vendor's point of view or a buyer's point of view, when I'm negotiating something, it appears neutral. So I have home advantage without them realizing. Try and flush out who is going to be at your meeting and why. Sometimes they'll bring an agent with them. If they're bringing an agent, why? And if you're talking anything creative with them, exchange and delayed completion or payment by installment, i.e. lease option, that person might come up with an objection. You need to frame a question to bring it into perspective. What's your experience on this if they come up with an objection? Oh, well, I've never done this before. Well, I've done a number of them. Shall we explore this a little further? And it normally puts them in a box that they have little or no experience in the areas that I sometimes work on. And a great one is working out how to spot a decision maker. People who say, I, me, my, generally are not the decision maker, because I do a lot of large corporate negotiations and deals. And people who come into that meeting saying, I, me, my, that's generally speaking an example of them not having the authority and feeling in a position of power. Somebody who is the decision maker will often say, I need to go back to my board. I need to defer to a colleague to get authorization. So language that they use when you do a lot of negotiation, you can pick up and work out who is the decision maker. So I don't want to stand here and tell you I'm brilliant and I'm one of the best negotiators, because I'm going to share with you the one that got away. Now, Unity is based in Coventry. For those of you in Coventry, you might recognize this building. It's Apollo House. It's a student block, 220 beds. I was negotiating on this. However, it had problems. The block was in immaculate condition. So what were the problems? The problem was it was in the Bahamas, not Coventry. Well, the legal owner was in the Bahamas, and therefore it didn't produce any accounts. And as I'm buying effectively a business as well as the building, the bank wanted to see accounts. There were no accounts. Now, what I did, using my skill and knowledge as an accountant, is I went 220 beds. How much are the rooms? 380 to 420. Quickly worked out there was about £890,000 rent roll. I then sat there and I went, that block, it's going to have a utility bill about 60,000, an internet bill about 10,000. You've got 5 staff, that's about 120,000. I quickly reverse engineered their business plan. I hadn't been in the meeting more than 10 minutes, and they went, here is our management accounts. I was within £5,000 of their net profit. We then had got their trust and understanding that we knew how their business worked. Very quickly, we then moved that forwards to how we're going to onshore this, because I shared my problem and said, how can you help me onshore this? I knew the solution, and the solution was to create a group structure where they own some shares in my company, I own some shares in their company. The bank agreed to that, which basically meant we could transfer cash for property. The beauty of that structure is under the 1932 Stamp Duty Act. Because it's an intercompany transfer, there is no stamp duty. Now that's quite smart on a slightly sizable purchase. The other smart thing is, as far as the bank were concerned, they were putting equity into this because they had shares. Therefore, they were offering me 100% finance to buy this. So why did it fail? I'd researched the tax, researched the business, I'd researched the people, I'd researched the tax, I'd researched the structure. I'd reverse engineered everything, leading to their full disclosure. But we might, if we wind the clock back to February of last year, find out that actually there was a thing called Brexit going on. And because Brexit was going on, the pound was depressed. And a Spanish student block operator jumped into the UK and basically were outbidding me on whatever I could do, because they had 30% more buying power because the pound was at a 30% discount. What I know is that block will come back to market, and I'm ready to seize it, because I know within that block there are £3 million worth of tax allowances that I'm going to take out of it. So that would have only cost me a small amount of money. But because it's owned by an offshore again, I have the opportunity in the future. So body language, I've talked about this a little bit before. Handshakes are really important. Now, if I was actually doing this live in the room, I would actually do some demonstrations, but as I'm not live in the room, I'm not going to shake anybody's hand. Needless to say, go and do a little bit of Googling rather than have me shake your hand, especially with CV19 in the throes. Do a bit of Googling and work out good handshakes and bad handshakes. We all know Donald Trump, and we know that he has a very dominant handshake, twisting his arm over to put the other person in a weaker position, the arm on the shoulder, the vice-like grip. Do not do those. They don't build rapport with people. They don't like you, and it breaks the trust barrier. You want a firm but not hard grip, palm to palm, and just nice for about 4 to 5 seconds, and then break. Anything longer makes people feel uncomfortable. So if you're in a meeting and you sense that the other side is clamming up on you and closing down, something which I do, and again, if you were in the same room as me, I would do this. I would get a pen out and I would give you a pen, and I would ask you to make some notes for me of something, because you are going from this stance, which is your closed stance, into an open stance because you're having to write, and I'm opening you back up and I'm relaxing you again. So it's just a subtle tactic. Give them something to hold. It doesn't necessarily have to be that. Ask them, do you have a glass of water or something? I'm feeling a bit croaky. So they break the stance, they go off, they get the water, and they're now opened up again. You've just got to break people's patterns. Now, I would ask you to raise your hands at this point if you know what the 738-55 rule is. So this is an interesting one, and I'll share this at the end of the slide. What I'm looking for is, do people's body language, or does people's body language match the words and the delivery, the tone and the style of how they are saying things? Because the tone is just as important as the words. Could you fetch me a glass of water? Can you fetch me a glass of water? You see the difference in tone. One, you're like, well, hang on, better get that. And the other one is, of course I will. So tone is important, slightly exaggerated, but you get the drift. Now, and I'm often in negotiations to buy buildings such as the one you've seen, and there's a multi-party panel that you're negotiating with. I often find it much, much better not to look at the person you're negotiating with, but to look at people who are within the group, because their guard is down. And if the person who is doing the speaking is not telling me 100% the truth, the body language of the others will show, whereas he might be controlling his, because they will fidget, they will be touching the face, their nose, their ears, and they're giving away clues that the other person is not telling the truth. So it's useful to tell. And this happens in a residential scenario where a husband and wife are talking, and the one's like, oh, I don't know what to say because he's telling a porky pie. You can use it in all sorts of scenarios. And I'm not suggesting you take note of that, Rupert. But it's very useful. Tactical empathy will also flush out inconsistencies in what they're saying. Oh, I really feel sorry for you about the fact that the mortgage company's repossessing you. And they go, yeah. And then you pursue that line of thread, and all of a sudden they start tripping over themselves, and it flushes out inconsistencies in the story. Now, a brilliant one that I like to observe is what I call the Pinocchio effect, hence my glamorous assistant on screen. Pinocchio effect is where if somebody is not being factually straight with you, they will insert more words into sentences than they actually need to. And they have verbal diarrhea. We've probably all heard people who have verbal diarrhea and you're trying to negotiate with them and they're just like off. And it's often when they're not telling you the truth and they're trying to cover something up and hide something. So I'll use, it seems like something is bothering you, as something to actually break that pattern that they are in. And then they actually realize that you've caught them out and it makes them clam up and shut up for a minute. And then you take the conversation off in the direction where you need to lead it. So what is the 738 rule, 38-55 rule? 7% is the words that you choose to say. 38% is your body language. Now, you probably notice I'm stood here and I'm Mr. Air Traffic Controller. I'm very there with my body language, which is 55%. And 38% is the tone. And you probably notice I slow and speed up how I'm delivering what I'm saying to you today. And I change the tone of it. And it's important when you're negotiating. So I'm not going to dwell on this bit, but these are some of the tools that I refer to when I'm negotiating. Now, Rupert is recording this, so you can go back in, slow it and play it back. But understand the personality type on the other side of the table. Are they a team player, a solo player, introvert, extrovert? Are they fast acting or slow to decide? If you mirror and match the person, because I'm often called a chameleon, where I mirror and match the person I'm with, you get better results. Follow their pace and tone. If you're a fast speaker, slow yourself down to their pace. If they're a fast speaker, then you speed up and join their pace. And you'll find that they relate to you a lot more. Rupert's nodding, so I assume you've encountered that one before, have you, Rupert? So again, personality types. Understand the different personalities of people within teams and within different settings, be it a family scenario, be it a business scenario. And work, if you understand teams and different personalities within a team, you know how to interact with each member. Do not stereotype people though, because stereotyping people is where you lose transactions. Because if I was having a meeting this afternoon with a very well-known property person, and they were at a meeting. They were a little older than myself, and they were at a meeting, and they're very social media savvy. And a youngster was sitting there doing a demonstration on social media. And I say youngster, so somebody in their early 20s was doing a demonstration. And the person basically went around and picked on everybody and said, "You won't understand this." That quite offended him. He got his phone out and he went, "Well, actually, look, I've done all that you've said, so teach me something new." And that person had stereotyped and lost his audience. It's not great. Now, what we need to remember is our brain is a weird and wonderful organ there. And our left brain, and forgive me if I'm mirrored, because when you sometimes do these things, do video, it's the opposite way around, but your left brain is where your rational thinking happens, and your right brain is where the emotion happens. Now, ironically, it's your left eye that sees the emotional things and your right eye that sees the rational. Now, why is this relevant? Basically, where you sit when you negotiate or where you stand when you negotiate is important. If you want somebody in an emotional negotiation, then you sit on their left-hand side. If you want them to feel in control, sit on their right. It's very subliminal. People will not be able to pick this up, that you're doing this, and they won't be able to put the finger on why or how that has happened and why they feel like they do. But it works. Now, I've shared all of these little tips with you. A good friend of mine, René de Koning, he's from Belgium. He's currently coaching in Australia. He goes around the world doing body language. And all of these different examples here, I'll let you Google the answers to these so I don't overrun my time slot with Rupert, but it will help you to understand what people are meaning. Nothing, you know, this is quite a powerful pose where people, sorry, that's my phone doing a Google search for me, thank you. It'll give you the answers to everything. So pay attention to non-verbal communication. It's 55% of what is not being said in a negotiation. My favourite radio station, I think it's everybody's favourite radio station, WeFM. What's in it for them? What is their motivation to do the transaction with you? And you have to get yourself and present the solution you offer in their terms. And you need to give them the illusion of control. That is the illusion of control. You don't give them the upper hand, you give them the illusion of control. And I'll share with you some of the property transaction where I've done that. You ask them calibrated how and what questions. How can we get to that solution that you're looking for? Pose the problem back to them. Something which I've got trading businesses and property businesses. In a trading business, sometimes I have customers who say, I can't afford to pay you, I want credit, blah, blah, blah. And I say, well, how am I supposed to deliver that project for you? I've got the wages to pay, the materials to buy, I've got the transport, I've got all of the overheads. And then they sit back and they reflect and they go, actually, you're quite right. And it gets them to think about your scenario with a how question. You can pose a what question at them. Now, the interesting one, there's 6 questions. How, what, when, why, where, and who. Never use a why question. And this is what gets my goat up a bit about the property community is go find your why. And I'll explain why you never use a why question. When you were 3 years old, you were sat on the mat at home and you had a mug of milk and you knocked it over by accident. And your parents, I'll use Rupert as the example, Rupert, why have you spilt your milk? And you sit there and go, oh, I didn't mean to. Then you're 5 years old, you knock some food on the floor. Rupert, why have you dropped your food on the floor? And you're sitting there going, hang on a minute, this isn't good. Rupert, why are you not eating your broccoli? Rupert, why haven't you done your homework? And it goes through teachers, through school, everywhere in life. Why subliminally put you into a defensive mode? Because all through your life, from when your earliest memories are, people are saying, why have you done that? And it puts you in a negative. So do not use why when negotiating. Ask questions that are going to force the empathy with them and avoid questions that will trigger reciprocity. If you ask them for something, then they will expect you to give something in return. So always frame your questions that you're not asking them directly to give you something. Other considerations when negotiating is you must solve problems for the seller and never go in there and sort of state things from your perspective. State the benefits to them first. And if you've got some bad news, make someone else the bad guy. I always use my solicitor. I use the fact that I've got an accountant, a valuer, the bank. Everyone else is the bad guy, not me. That way I can maintain relationship with them. I might not agree with what they want, and I'll say, I'll go and ask my solicitor if we can do that for you. And I'll come back. Do you know what? He's the business prevention team. He's stopping me doing that transaction. So I make other people out to be the guy. And whenever you negotiate, always negotiate in bits. When Rupert was younger, he never went up to his dad and went, Dad, or I'll do it the right way first. Rupert went up to his dad, Dad, can I borrow the car tonight? And his dad replies, of course, son, you can have the car. Dad, can I have £50 for a tank of petrol? Yeah, okay, Rupert. Dad, can I stay out past midnight tonight? Go on then. Dad, can I bring the girlfriend back and can she stay the night? Go on then. If I turn around and said, Dad, can I borrow the car, have 50 quid, stay out till gone midnight and bring the girlfriend back in one breath, you wouldn't do it. You don't play chess, doing chess moves in one go. Why do you negotiate in one go? Use steering questions to identify their objections to each little bit. So my killer tactic here is negotiate in bits. And go and observe your children. Your children are the best at doing it. They will come up to you and go, Dad, can I? And they'll nibble, nibble, nibble at you all the way. And when you observe that tactic and apply it into business, it works really well. Now, often you get vendors, sellers, or people you're buying from or selling to, and they have unrealistic terms. So I don't make my offers in writing. I always test what I'm putting to them verbally. If somebody is pressuring me and saying, I must have something in writing, I will do a little checklist, like the box that I've put in the top right there. And I will put some options, tick boxes, and they'll come back often and go, well, I want the 495 price and I want the profit share. Well, I'm sorry, I can't give you the profit share on the 495 price. I can only give it you on the other options. So it helps to steer and to focus them and extract from them what actually is important. And I will make clear that terms are not interchangeable. If they are dictating they want a price, then I will dictate the terms, and vice versa. If I dictate the price, they dictate the terms. So I will always, however, confirm what I've agreed with them in writing. And I will use pattern breakers if we get to a deadlock situation. A pattern breaker is where, listen, I can feel that we are at a point where we're not going forwards. So let's have a look at this from a different perspective. And it moves them out of that deadlock situation to move forwards with the transaction. Now, this is a site in Rugby. It was across 5 different titles. The area in red from where the van is at one end to where the wall with the bungalow is at the other end. And in there, well, there's a couple of buildings. There's also some adverse title as well. Now, the vendor in this situation, they are in their 70s. And this is where I had to move them from logical to emotional and back again. He has health problems, and they saw this as a problem they did not want to pass on to their children because it was a bit of a mess. The garage was being rented at a very poor rent. The bungalow they'd let out, tenants had trashed it, and it had been vacant for 12 months or more. You can see from the garden, it's not in a great place. And it was across 5 titles. It was originally owned by his father, and his mother sadly had dementia and actually destroyed all the title deeds and paperwork to do with it. So they've been trying to resurrect all of the paper trail. Now, they wanted way too much money for what could be developed on the site. So I had to move them between the logical and the emotional states. They were in a very emotional state. They needed this sold. They wanted to clean up their affairs before it got any worse. So I moved them into the logical state and said, look, the reality of this is I would love to offer you what you want for this. However, the cost of the site, the cost of clearing up the asbestos that was on the site, removing the petrol tanks, which were just covered over because it was a motor garage that was trading there, and the cost of what I can sell these houses at, and here's the comparables in the area, means that I'm actually paying you more money, therefore I'm making a charity, than I will make. So I'm making no profit and it'll run at a loss. And as soon as they started to see the logic of it, they recognized they were being unrealistic. And then we could get down to a negotiation. So I moved them back to their emotional state where they could sit comfortably. So useful statements I often use, and forgive me for putting the photographs. Normally when I'm presenting this live, I'll say to people, take photographs of screens, but you're going to watch it on the video again, so you can actually get these back. how much money do you need now? And that often frames exactly what their need is for selling something if they're selling. If I paid you that cash price, can I pay the rest in installments? It's a really great way of framing doing a lease option. If I paid you, what will often come back from that is, what do my installments look like? And I put the question back to them, what do you want it to look like? And I draw parallels to everyday things, because we've probably all bought a car, and when we've gone into a garage, they've gone, well, I'll sell it you for £99 today, £199 a month, and at the end of 3 years, you just pay us £5,000. Now, I will often draw a parallel to things like that. I will also focus them by saying to them, where would you like your next mortgage payment to come from? Your bank account or mine? That demonstrates that you can do a transaction at speed with them. And if you know how, if either you've got the cash or you know how to get the cash to complete transactions at speed, that's a really powerful phrase to use with people, because it focuses their mind. And I use that phrase on this particular transaction. This is in Wellingborough, Northamptonshire. And again, it had a couple of fallen over sales. And the seller was basically being told that the reason they fell over was because it was a mix of commercial and residential, and they couldn't get a mortgage. Well, I buy commercial. That's my bag. And that's eminently mortgageable. So they were being told a fib, shall we say, by the people who were pulling out. So I helped them because they've got high bills on this every month. Do you want the next bills to come out of my bank account? I removed the pain and the uncertainty, and therefore I was able to structure a transaction very quickly on an option to close that off. Now, we need to get agents on board when we're working with them. And I never talk detail to an agent. I'll only ever talk concepts. And I will do things to support the agent. Now, things that I do to support agents, I get a lot of transactions passed to me. They come often off market. And if I don't know somebody who can do something with it, or it doesn't suit my criterion, I will pick up the phone to the agents I know that handle the type of transaction in that area. And I will give them the transaction and introduce that person and that property to them. Now, what that does is that creates what I've just said earlier not to do if it's you, which is create reciprocity from the agent to me. I've just given them something. They immediately go, what we got on our books, we can give back to Andrew. It's a brilliant tool for giving to an agent, give you something back. You've always got to get the agent on board when you're doing something. And the agent is motivated by commission. A lot of what they do is commission driven. So how do you get the agent on board? Well, what properties have you got that you've got listed at the moment that you're making no money on? Because I'm interested in stuff you're not making money on, and I'm going to help you to make money. That really does focus them. Now, I don't know if there's anybody on here because I can't do it with hands, but rent to rent, rent to SA is quite a popular strategy. And what people do is they often pop along to an agent and go, look, I'll handle all the maintenance, I'll deal with all the tenants, I'll take all the hassle off you. But what you're doing is you're ignoring the agent's business model. The agent's business model is to make commission, a markup, off every single repair. They charge a monthly management fee to the landlord. So you're cutting out his income. So is an agent going to refer you transactions when you're taking money out of his till? Probably not. Something agents do like is, I only work 9 to 5, I only contact you in those hours. And they go, whoa, my out of hours service bill is going to go down. My out of hours phone never going to ring. That's great. It's music to their ears. So use those tactics when negotiating. So this is a series of transactions which I've done with one of my teams that I work with in Coventry. So you'll probably recognise some of these houses from Coventry. And what we did with agents was we said, Listen, we understand because of the tenant fee ban, you can't charge consumers fees anymore. I'm a business. I'm happy to pay you an admin fee for every transaction you bring in, and I'll pay you £500. And I'm looking to do one deal a week this year. That translates into £26,000 commission in his pocket. He will quickly work that maths out. And if he doesn't, you can help him. That's £26,000 commission for you this year. He immediately starts to wake up and respond to you. So I won't go into detail, but these are different tools that I use when negotiating. The Socratic method of negotiation. It came from Socrates, the Greek philosopher. And I've put the picture up there of the people on the boat because we all say, don't let people come into the UK over the channel. And the thing is, they're in a rubber dinghy. The dinghy's going down. So are you saying I should turn the dinghy round and let it sink out at sea and they all drown? And using that method helps the person to reframe in their own mind, actually, that's not quite what I meant. And then they start to formulate their own answers. And that method is a really powerful tool for getting them to actually come around to your position. Very clever tactical language. Body language, emotional intelligence, personality types, home advantage, question framing. They're all tools I use, and for you to go and look up some more on, because I haven't got time to cover those in any depth at all today. Now, again, this is another property in Wellingborough, Northamptonshire. The vendor of this, it was on the market at £550. We agreed a price of £350. This was his kitchen. I knew that our first meeting was going to be in his kitchen, and he would sit at the head of the table and put the table between me and my colleague, and we sat on the side of that table. The second meeting, I knew if I did my job right, would break down, and it did. He sat on the sofa, and we sat in the two armchairs opposite. I worked that to get to the third meeting. At the third meeting, we sat side by side on his sofa here. Now, this gentleman was an experienced landlord. He'd got a portfolio of 12 buy-to-lets. He'd been in the game over 20 years. This was his personal house. His problem was he was building a mini mansion, 30,000 square foot mini mansion. He'd run out of cash. He'd sold a couple of buy-to-lets, but his builder was taking him to court because he'd run out of cash to pay the builder. He'd had 2 sales fall through on this. So I'd flushed out all of his pains. I used appropriate language to break those barriers down, and I presented him a clear, easy to understand solution that we gave him sufficient cash to get the builder off his back, and then we took control of that property. He could finish it, and we would take over it when it was appropriate for him to move out into his new build. So, moving on. I also help others, and this here is Mark, who's a member of my community, negotiate and buy portfolios. This landlord here lives in the south of England, but he's got a portfolio in Rugby, and these are the 4 houses that were part of that portfolio. And the tactic I used here was people believe 100% of what they say, but they only believe 5% of what you say, and silence is your most powerful tool. Now, Mark had been negotiating this for some time and getting nowhere. It took me 2 hours to close on that transaction, working out a solution that worked for the vendor and worked for, and getting in the whole portfolio controlled and purchasing it one property at a time in different tax years and in installments, therefore good cash flow. A tactic I like to use a lot, and I see Rupert nodding here, be the second smartest man in the room. Because if you're the second smartest man in the room, the other person thinks they're the smartest, and therefore they think they have the upper hand. Again, it's part of giving illusion and control. Now, where have I done this? This is the finished property, I hasten to say, and you can go and look at this on Google Maps back in 2015. It's in Luton, and basically it was a cruddy little bungalow. The seller of this property was 65 years old. He'd got a mortgage. He'd still got another 5 years left to run on the mortgage, but his mortgage company were telling him he had to repay it and clear the mortgage within 6 months. He didn't have that cash lying around. So I did a fact find on my first meeting, as I've advised you to do earlier. I then went back with a colleague. With my colleague, I got my colleague to ask a million questions, and she is brilliant at just asking question after question. We'd scripted the questions before we went in. And on my first visit, I just happened to notice that he banked with a particular lender. So I went and got a mortgage offer off that lender. At the end of probably 35, 40 minutes of Denise asking questions, I just stopped for a second and I said, Lawrence, forgive me one moment. I've just been listening to what you're telling Denise, and you've told her that the bank are evicting you from your home because of your age. Now, ironically, I was coming here to demonstrate to you I've got the money to buy this. I've actually got a mortgage offer. And you've told Denise that the bank I've got the mortgage offer is the same one that you've got. And the Robin Blighters, you told Denise they're giving you 0.25% on the cash and they're charging me 5.5%. I tell you what, shall we cut the bank out? And we agreed a transaction where we cut the bank out. That is how to get vendor finance. I literally said, shall we cut the bank out? Having demonstrated how they were robbing me and robbing him. And it was a fantastic transaction to close on. So I said I'd give you a bonus, how I bought the bank. What did the bank look like? There it is, that's the bank I used to work for. And that's what I bought. I should have actually put a photograph of what it looks inside today. We're halfway through the conversion at the moment on that. So here it is. And I raised the funds on a crowdfunding platform. I didn't purchase it for 275. I purchased it for a lot less, but was given 275. I also got some private financing. At the charity Christmas do, there was a magician, and the magician very generously offered to stump up a large six-figure sum of cash. So we've got more than enough cash that we need for this transaction. So, I did say I'd actually give you a bonus. So before I jump onto the bank, I'll give you the bonus. How do I submit blind tenders and win? This was a blind tender to purchase that building. Well, the first thing you've got to do is understand the scoring criterion for the tender. That is critical. If you don't understand that, you can pop any price in you want and you'll not get there because you haven't understood the criteria. Now, I'm very good at winning tenders, and I submit tenders 2-3 times a week, not just on property, but in a commercial environment. You need to understand which areas are scoring highly. And if you understand the areas that score highly, you make sure that your answers in those areas are very strong. You also flush out and understand the red lines. Now, I did this with the agent who was holding the tender on this particular building. And my tender was not the highest. I got accepted because I met the criterion that scored highest for them. They wanted people with capability and competence. So I demonstrated that when I submitted my pack of evidence. They received 29 pages in response to the tender. And the other thing I do is I don't put the price on the front page and I don't put it at the back. I hide it in the middle of the sandwich. Then they have to thumb through all the evidence to find the price. But as they're thumbing through, they're going, actually, this is quite good. Prepare a professional pack. And don't just do it if you're tendering. When you put an offer in, don't put a cheeky email in or don't do it over the phone. Prepare something in writing and do it professionally. So what do I submit when I put a pack in? And this is a little bit of my hidden IP as to what I do. I put all of this together, a covering letter. Who are the buyers? Our address details and all of our contact details for communication, our capability and competence, our conditions of offer. It's very important. Our conditions of offer, our compliance with AML, anti-money laundering, how we're going to fund the purchase. Now, with this particular transaction, the bank, what I did, I put bank statements in from myself and business partners. I also put in a letter of credit from the bank to say they were going to lend. Therefore, I slam dunked it in that I could buy that 4 times over with the amount of cash we put down. So they had confidence that we would not pull out. We then put the offer in the middle. We then put who our solicitors are, a summary of what the transaction is. We put some signed board minutes in. Very important, because it shows the transaction is approved. And it also shows that you've taken it seriously when negotiating. Proof of funds, company registration certificates, and other supporting evidence that is my hidden ingredients that I keep to myself. But that's what I do when submitting tenders. And I would say I win 9 out of 10. And it's down to how you do it. And I'm often told, I mean, I recently put an offer in. Unfortunately, the seller has pulled out. It was a large restaurant and bar for 2.5 million. I was buying it for 120,000. And it was a back-to-back transaction with them. It fell over this week, and that's purely, Rupert and I were talking about it earlier today, to do with cash flow and the fact that this recession, mini bubble, mini blip that is happening at the moment is not like 2008 at all. That was all about balance sheet. This is all about cash flow, and that is why the banks are giving mortgage holidays and putting cash in, and the government are giving funds to trade short term. Completely different to what it was in 2008. And those with cash and cash reserves are going to survive. And my advice is, if you're in the woods and a bear is chasing you, you better hope you're in the woods with somebody else that can't run as fast as you. Because if you can outrun the bear, which is the slower person, you will survive. Therefore, if your cash flow is a bit better than everybody else's, you'll come out the other side of this. So going back to the bank, what did it look like? Well, on the left-hand side of the screen, you've got the banking call as was. On the right-hand side of the screen is what we're doing. We're converting the back of that unit to a flat. And I'm just about to release a video on my YouTube as to how we got the planning through on this in days, not months. So I'll let you watch out for that one. On the upper floors, the left-hand side was the offices, or should I say the little square, the 4 meter by 4 meter square was the office. We've got a toilet block that was bigger than the office. We've got a kitchen as big as the office, and the stairwell and corridors that are bigger than the office. So there was a lot of wasted space there. And on the top floor, again, there was more offices, which we're making into another flat there. And we got all of the planning permissions through in days. It was 9 days from submitting the application to meeting the planning officer on site. She gave a verbal approval and promised us that we would have that before Christmas. She missed the before Christmas, but it came in the post between Christmas and New Year. That is what it looks like now from the outside. I'm a little bit cheeky and gorilla in that I got my let boards up, and already we are in negotiation to with a commercial tenant who actually wants to take the whole lot. So we've been stripping out, and we're just waiting to finalize terms, and a commercial tenant will take the whole building. We purchased that at just over 200, and that gives the commercial valuation on it, will give it a valuation between 800,000 and 1.2 million, depending on the valuer. Therefore, quite a good deal. And I had to put something funny in. We went into the bank when we got the keys, and sellotape to the wall above the area where the safe used to be was this envelope with that code in. Incredulous. But I thought, how funny is that? I've got to share that. So, powerful statement that I use when I'm negotiating. May I ask you some questions? Who is going to say no? But the most important thing is they have given you permission to ask awkward questions. How will this solution be better than where you are now? You're moving them into a state of away from a problem that they have. How quickly do you want to do this transaction? How would it make you feel? Shall we cut the bank out and I pay you the margin? They're all very powerful statements that I use regularly and work. Some of my favourite statements: would you like the next mortgage payment to come out of my bank account or yours? If the price drops, can I extend the terms of this agreement? I'm not sure of the most efficient way to do this. I need to speak to my accountant solicitor. It defers the transaction and gives you the flexibility to make the contracts assignable, i.e. put somebody else's name on the contract in place of you. What percentage of people do you think have got that level of deposit? So if you're buying a house at 200,000, as an investor, you need 50,000 deposit. So what percentage of people do you think have got 50,000 in their bank account? And it helps the vendor to then focus down that actually there's not a lot of people that much money in their bank account. Therefore, if you're putting an offer in, they better take your offer. Lots of different negotiation tactics. The one which I recommend you don't use is snow job or intimidation. They're not good negotiation tactics, nor actually is aggressive bullying. But the other tactics are useful and worth you doing a bit of a Google on to see which ones might work in different scenarios. I mentioned I've got a YouTube channel, and at the top of the row here is Rupert's good friend David Clouter, my good friend, and we produce a video series. We release one a week, 250 plus property strategies. Again, a local landlord in Rugby, I assisted take the valuation office on with regards to his HMOs and the fact that they were rebanded to Band A. We overturned that decision, and there's lots of other videos there. Mark Smith, who I believe Rupert is lining up as one of your next speakers. I'd like to say a huge thank you to Rupert. He's got a phenomenal wife, Elena. This is David Clouter and his wife, Irma, and we're at the brilliant, fabulous Fab Clinic. And if you've not been there, all I can say is get your bum up there, because it really is brilliant, isn't it, Rupert? My contact details are there, and if you want to keep in touch, stalk me, follow me, whatever, please do so. Email me if you've got questions. I'm happy to answer that. Rupert, thank you very much. Thank the audience for hanging in there.
Andrew, that was awesome. Absolutely awesome. Thank you. I'm going to take some questions and also some comments. So what I'm going to do now is unmute everybody. So you're all unmuted. I don't know the best way. Do you, Andrew, can you see the chat on your screen?
I can't see the chat on my screen, and I can probably stop the share of the presentation, and that might bring up the chat.
Claudine, I think yours was first. About, would you like? Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah. I think your
Hi,
question.
Claudine. How are you?
Yes, it's
Hey, I'm all right. Apart from I got the flu, but we won't discuss that.
You asked
Self-isolate.
about what business he bought for 12,400.
Yeah, I run a media company. It's a media and manufacturing business, and it was some time ago. We print marketing materials for clients, paper part printing, printing on plastic materials such as optical discs, USBs. It was in that industry there, to which I have a business. And they basically, the crux of it was, I understand mezzanine finance, and they had bought their business with finance that was off balance sheet. So lots of people were lending them money, thinking that they were a strong business, but what they couldn't see was all the money was actually off balance sheet that they'd borrowed from the banks. So that was the industry it was in. And their clients included the BBC, Warner Brothers Studios. One of my clients was Disney, so it worked very well with what I was doing. Sony Entertainment was a mutual client we both had. And it basically meant I was able to get into my business a lot of additional top-tier clients to work with. So it was a no-brainer of a deal. It was just, how hard did I want to negotiate? They had higher offers off other people, but other people wanted to cherry pick bits and pieces. What I understood was the administrator wanted a quick, clean deal, and he wanted the keys back to those premises within days, and he didn't want to involve half a dozen different solicitors negotiating on different bits. So that was understanding the process and the seller and how I could facilitate making his job easy. And that's why I won at a ridiculously low balled off.
Amazing. It sounds great.
Yeah.
Pauline, you also asked about how the rent to buy works. Is that right?
Yeah, it was. So Rupert, just as a suggestion, I think Shane put it in as well. It's easier if everyone else goes on mute, and then when we have a question, we can unmute one person, because there's a lot, and otherwise people won't be able to hear Andrew properly.
Right, I'm just doing that now. Okay, how's that?
Okay, perfect. So I've unmuted myself now just to talk, and then Andrew will need to do the same. And then once I've asked my question, then I can mute myself, and then it will be gone.
I think I'm unmuted. Yeah. Have you got me there?
Yes.
Can you hear me? So your question was about rent to buy. How does that work?
Yeah.
I've done a couple of these transactions with members of my...
Sorry.
I'll carry on, Rupert, don't worry. Can everybody hear me? Yeah, you can hear me, good. Basically what rent to buy is where somebody is struggling to get finance to buy a property, but you're happy to take payments on a regular basis. And I actually did this in a meeting, and I demonstrated it to somebody, and somebody sitting in the meeting said, would that actually work the other way round? Now, the person I was doing this transaction with had a house on the market. It was quite an expensive house. It was on at 495 on the market, 495,000. And it had been on the market 8 months. The agent had brought 3 people through the door in 8 months, and he was getting a bit frustrated. He turned around and said, why don't you offer somebody to rent it to and buy it in installments? And he said, how does that work? I said, literally as I've just described it. You form an agreement with them. They will put down a deposit as though they're going to buy it, and then they will pay you monthly installments. If they default on any of those installments, then they've broken the agreement to buy it, and they're then just a normal tenant. But because they're buying it, psychologically, it's now their home. And you say to them, all of the repairs are yours because this is your home. Therefore, you don't get call outs for repairs and all sorts of other stuff. Now, they said, how do I find a person that looks like that criterion? So I went through it and I went, well, simply speaking, your house is 495. At this budget level, you're either looking for a very high net worth, which if they're a high net worth, they can probably afford this on a mortgage. Alternatively, it's somebody who's self-employed. Now, Rupert will know this, being self-employed. A lot of self-employed people, the first thing you do when you walk into your accountant is you go, I want to pay less tax. But when you say that, they reduce your profits, they reduce your tax, and it reduces your earnings, which then means when a bank comes to look at you and your income, they go, actually, you're not earning as much. So what you have to do is help them to understand and to move some of their bits and bobs that we all stick through our companies out of the way, and to actually reward yourself well so that the company trades well. So you don't want any trading losses, you don't want any low profits, you want to have a couple of good years. And if you pay your company, you can do that. Now, or it could be somebody who started a business but doesn't have 3 years account. In his instance, he went into the local pub and he put this out there on the Friday night. On the Saturday morning, and it gobsmacked me when he phoned me up. On the Saturday morning, somebody knocked his front door and he phoned me up and he said, what do I do now? Somebody who, they run murder mystery nights, had knocked his front door saying, I've always wanted to live in this village, but can't find a house. We can't get a mortgage. We did want yours. How does this rent to buy thingy work? So he explained, basically, you pay me a monthly rent. you pay a bit more than the rent would be, which in his case, a monthly rent for his property would have been £1,500 a month. So he charges them £2,000 a month. £500 of that will come price. The £1,500 stays in my pocket. So what price do you want? Agreed a price of 5.5 because they were basically getting credit terms to buy his house. So whereas it was on the market at 4.95 and the agent had set his expectation, you'll probably get offers around 4.50 to expect. He got £75,000 more, plus he'd agreed a 2-year transaction with them where they would pay him £2,000 a month for that 2 years, of which he would keep the 1,500s and he would knock the 500s off the price. And he got them to put up £50,000 in cash because they had that as a deposit. They were just not mortgageable. That's how it works, simplistically speaking, in a case study. And the person sitting in the meeting was actually a tenant, and he wanted to buy the house that he was renting. He said, "How does it work?" And I said, "You just have the same conversation in reverse with the landlord." So, was that helpful and useful?
Really?
Yeah, that was amazingly helpful in a case study, actually. That really brought it to life for me. Thank you very much. That's a really, really great presentation, by the way. It was really very, very useful. Thank you.
Well, thank you. The gentleman who that case study relates to comes to my property meet every single month, and I can introduce you to him and you can talk to him direct.
When they allow you to come back from Spain, Claudine.
Yeah, I'm stuck in the UK at the moment.
You're in the UK. Just as I say, I'm learning Zoom. This is my first night on it. So if anybody wants, I'm going to find somebody else who wants a question from the chat. But if anybody wants to ask a question, somewhere on your software, whether it's an iPad or whatever, you can raise your hand. That doesn't mean doing that, because not everybody is, I can't see everybody. So thanks, David. Hello, David and Irma, by the way.
Hello, David and Irma.
But if you can, with your software, raise your hand, and then I know that I can bring you in for the next question, and then you can unmute yourself and do it that way around. So Elena, she's in the next room to me at the moment, so on the iPad. You asked one about the planning, so can you unmute yourself and ask the question?
Well, I think many people ask this question, that it sounds quite awesome, planning in days. Could you tell us a little bit more about it, please?
Certainly, certainly. Well, I'm releasing a video on that because I did an interview with the architect actually inside the building to explain the process. Very simplistically speaking, the planning process we went for on this building, instead of applying for a full planning permission, we went for a certificate of lawfulness, which was a prior approval on the ground floor under a permitted development rate. On certain commercial buildings, there are permitted development rights. Also on residential buildings, you can convert from a C3 to a C4, that's a house, to a HMO in plain language, with a permitted development right, provided a council hasn't put an Article 4, as they've done in Nottingham, for example, on the area. So we used a prior approval process to obtain a certificate of lawfulness, to say that it was lawful for us to create a flat on the ground floor. With the upper 2 floors, because they were offices, we had to use a different process. Again, that was a permitted development process. And what we did was applied to convert from office to residential for those upper 2 floors. Now, generally speaking, the legal timetable for a council to respond is 56 days. Councils very frequently take 56 days and they'll only give you the answer on the 56th day. Now, there are only 3 grounds that the council can object on. And I cover those in the video because I'm not the architect or the planning consultant, but they are. And what we do is when we put an application in, we work out from the other side, the council's perspective, and it works on normal planning applications too. What are the grounds that they could object on? And then we put a statement in to demonstrate with evidence how we satisfy those grounds, taking them off the agenda. And Susan, the planner, when she came out on day 9, she said, I might as well pop around here because you've done my job for me, you've answered all the questions, and I can't object to this, and you know I can't. So I'm going to approve it. And I went, well, thank you, that's kind. And I ended up having a 45-minute chat, picking the brains of the planner, who was very open to sharing all of her knowledge about the inside on the process. So when we have other applications go in, I know the things that are beneficial to us. So simply speaking, know the tick box criteria, because planning is not about emotion, it's not about neighbours and objections. They have fixed set criteria and they have to put ticks in boxes. So if you go through the checklist and put the ticks in the boxes for them, they know you know what you're doing, and then they know that you also are not going to be overturned because you've eliminated any objections that they can come up with. So just eliminate their objections before they can object. Powerful, isn't it?
Brilliant, thank you. I'm going to ask if there's any more questions and comments. I noticed, Rado, you've asked a question which is probably, the answer to that's probably another hour's session. So maybe we'll get Andrew back to talk about that, you know, shortly, actually. Anything you want to say quickly on it, Andrew? Can you please tell us about individual room HMO banding?
Individual, that is a good session, yes.
Yeah.
The crux of the matter was that the General Rates Act 1965 is what everybody needs to refer to. People are jumping up and down and they're getting very heated and emotional. These laws have been laid in place for a long time. All that's happening is the VOA and councils, because of budgets and because of lack of funding, are having to find other ways of bringing money in. So what they're doing is they're revisiting and particularly picking on HMOs and going their individual dwellings. Now, there's a number of criteria that meet a dwelling. There's 4 specific criteria which are covered in that video. And the reason Tony beat the VOA is basically his HMO rooms were initially self-contained with an ensuite, a kitchenette. They had their own electric supply, their own fuse board, and their own electric heaters. Now, the fire officers, when they came round to look at his building, he bought it in 2016 from auction, as a HMO, basically said, we don't like the fact that these have got individual boards. That's a fire risk for the building, because Tony was wanting to convert the offices into more HMO space. So they made him convert that from a self-contained rooms into individual rooms. Now, as part of that process, he put a central heating system in, so the whole building that was communal, removed all the kitchenettes and basically put 2 kitchens in, one on the upstairs, one on the downstairs, and he put 3 bathrooms into the whole building, removing the en-suites. What he'd done was left the water pipes with the tails just sticking up, capped off in the rooms. And the VOA said, that could be a water supply, therefore it's habitable. Remove that. So what he did was took it underneath the floorboards and cut it off. Now, the reason it went to court is he complied with their request and they went, now we're not changing our mind. So he took them to court and a judge said, these are not habitable spaces because a person cannot live without water. So what you need to do is go and revisit this and aggregate. And aggregation is where you get 2 or 3 rooms joined together because they've got a common kitchen or a common bathroom. So in summary, that was it. But there's various tests that you need to go through, various tests that the first tier land tribunal, your judge will sit and assess your case on. And I cover those all in a 25-minute video.
You've got that on YouTube at the moment, have you, Andrew?
It is on YouTube, yes. It's quite an in-depth video. It's had several thousand views and it was only released about 4 weeks ago.
Fantastic. Is anybody putting their hands up for a question? Or are we okay? Yeah, Elena? Yeah.
Yep.
Just on the rent to buy,
Yes.
curious about the contracts that have been used to take the 50,000 deposit and obviously to be released out of the contract if they're not paying the payments?
Yeah. Effectively, what we do is we use a suite of documents that we'd typically use on a lease purchase option. And within the document, you define down the sets of money that are being paid. The 50K was not actually defined as a deposit, it was defined as an entry fee, an application fee for this, of which part was refundable if they reneged on the contract and part was not refundable. So it wasn't a deposit as in under the protecting a tenant deposit as you would normally do. So it was actually contractually within the contract by solicitors, and it's very important. Don't try and do this yourself, download a form off the internet and fill it in. You're talking a lot of money. Go pay a solicitor. Martin paid the solicitor to do this. I connected him and a connected buyer to two solicitors who understood this type of transaction, and that's important. If you go your local high street and say, can you help me? They won't have a clue. It's a bit like asking an electrician to go and do the plumbing for you or fit a gas boiler. He can't. You've got to ask somebody with specialist knowledge.
Very cool with the deposit.
Thanks. Any comments from anybody? Anybody want?
Question.
Yeah.
You said on. Sorry, you said on the rent to buy. Tenant ended up offering 475K for a house, and how will that be finalized in 2 years? What was the arrangement?
Well, yeah, it was on the market at 495. The agent suggested that people would make offers and he'd probably accept around 450. He actually sold it for 525, and he got a £50,000 down payment on that, an upfront payment. So if you think about it like buying a car, you pay your £99 deposit, you pay your £199 a month, and then there's a balance in payment at the end. The 475 at the end, basically, he is able to demonstrate, I've paid 50,000 plus £500 a month, and a statement between Martin's solicitor and the solicitor confirms that that money has been transacted and can be evidenced in the bank account and therefore is classed as the deposit. He then raises a mortgage because he's worked 2 years worth of good, clean accounts that make him mortgageable to the value of the remainder or his extra cash that he might put in and the mortgage. So he's borrowing bank finance for the remainder. It's a stepping stone method of finance. You can do it for the term, but it's just a stepping stone in this instance.
Right. My question is like what the final value will be agreed upon, because let's say we can have an arrangement that I will buy something from you for £1 million, yeah, but then at the end of the day, it is a bank who is doing that lending, yeah. So yeah. How this work out to that amount? Well,
it's a special negotiation between two parties to decide how much is market value. With regards to the bank, they will bring a valuer in. A valuer will make a judgment call as to what it's worth. They have agreed a price of 525. If the bank's the price is 450, then the gentleman has to put £75,000 of cash in plus his deposit money. So it is down to fair market value. The fact it's been on market, it was 10 market, okay, he didn't get any buyers, but we're talking quite a high-end house. We're talking, this was 18 months ago, so in the middle of Brexit scenario, Martin was building his own new build, had finished it, and basically wanted to move out of the one to the other. He didn't actually need the cash in his own bank account and was able to put the solution together.
Brilliant.
Is that helpful?
Right. Any other comments, anybody? I've got a few things to wrap up with. First of all, thank you, very much, Andrew. That was awesome.
You're welcome.
What a
Thank
start.
everybody for joining us.
And also thank you, Shane, for helping me to get this thing set up and teaching me how to use this software. Obviously, you know, you're not a bad teacher, but you could do better the way I've managed it. But
You've got work to do.
yeah, down to me. I've got to do more homework. And thank you all for listening in and watching. I hope you got a lot out of it. I certainly did. Now, this is a public session. I'm going to call them sessions because some of the things we're doing are webinars, some are other things. So this is a public session. The Unity is a members group, and we have the Facebook Unity group, which is a public group, which is what brings the public into sessions such as this. But we will also be having quite a lot of members only sessions as well, and we're going to mix it. So over time, keep an eye out. There's going to be public sessions, there's going to be members only sessions. And the sessions will be presentations such as today, and we've already mentioned that Mark Alexander and Mark Smith wish to do a session, so that's great. We're also going to have small group chats on maybe specific subjects. I know that Rachel wants to have a chat and learn a bit more about serviced accommodation processes and things like that. So there are things that are specific just to a couple of people, a smaller group of people that we can chat on. I think what's really going to be supportive over the coming months is member experiences, and I want to try to get regular sessions with the members, maybe as many as 3 times a week, where people can relate their experiences through this madness, how they've dealt with getting funding from the government loan screen, from getting interest-free loans from the banks, how they're managing tenants who are refusing to pay, how they're managing tenants who are being genuinely made redundant and helping them with the benefits and so on and so forth. So what I want to do is to have quite regular, quite intimate chats really with members on that kind of sharing of experience, so that we can all learn and we can all try to sort of support each other getting through this really tough time. As always has been the case with Unity members, I'm available for one-on-one sessions, and I'm more than happy to use this platform Zoom to have one-on-one meetings with people, and we can discuss strategy, we can discuss whatever needs to be discussed there. So that's what's coming up. I have put on the Unity Files Vault on the Dropbox link, which you can get through the Slack forum that we use. I have put a spreadsheet up on cash flow management, and one of my next members sessions that I want to talk about is cash flow management. It was mentioned tonight by Andrew. It's really, really important at the moment, and I want to really give you some help and tools in how to physically do it, you know, the process of doing that cash flow management. It is almost a daily job, but once you've got it set up, it's only a few minutes every day. And also things like prioritizing who you're going to get the red letters from if necessary, and who you should not miss a payment from at this point in time. So those of you who want to know a little bit more about the membership, then please could you send me your email address via a direct message or messenger, or however you can get hold of me. Please send me your email address and I will send you much more information about what Unity is, and what membership involves, etc., the benefits, the costs and everything else. You'll then be able to have access to everything that we're doing and all the support that we are trying to provide. Please give me feedback, whether it's publicly on the Unity Facebook group, whether it's by direct message or through the Slack group. Can I have feedback on tonight's session, so that we can just improve them as we go on? And of course, if you really enjoyed it, which I just thought it was awesome tonight, can you please go on the Unity Facebook group and make a little post and just say how fantastic Andrew was? Andrew has his own involvement with his own meet in rugby as well, and I'm sure that I would certainly recommend that you go along. I think that when we get back to normal service resumed, I think Andrew's meet is often the night before or 2 nights before the Unity day. So there is opportunity there to come up the night before, go to Andrew's meet, and then come the next day to the Unity. So that, I think together we can really work something through there. And apart from that, leaves me to say thank you. And if anybody would like to say anything or make any comments, please do.
Well, firstly, I'd like to say I'm just reading the chat coming down the side here, and thank you everybody for your absolutely delightful feedback. I'm pleased it was helpful to people, and you are all very welcome to join me at my meeting as well. And I shall look forward to meeting you in person at your meeting as and when we come out of lockdown. So I will be joining you and meeting you in person.
Brilliant. I'm going to stop recording now. So thanks very much and stay safe.
Thank you.